It's Reiki, but not as you know it.
Hello there, Linda.
Hello, Martin. I'm just coming in. I've been actually out and about for, I think, hours. I was walking down Clarity Peak, following the path of souls, heading to the mountain range because I love the mountains, and it's a familiar path. But as I was walking, all of a sudden, there was this giant boulder in the path. I was taken aback. I kind of spun around, made myself a little dizzy because I was trying to find, like, okay, where do I go? And I needed to sit down and think about, like, why is this presenting itself now? What is going on? So unfortunately, I went back the way I came, which I don't think is what I was supposed to do, but I did. And I walked by Cornelia and she just gave me a knowing smile, and she said, I'll be right over with your tipple. And I thought, oh, what is she going to give me? So I don't know if you've ordered yours or not, but I see her coming over. But I'll wait for you to tell me what yours is, and I'll try to figure out what mine is, because it's very bizarre looking as I see her coming my way.
Well, they've got a brand new tipple, which I thought I had to try because it is banana flavored, and I'm always partial to a banana flavored tipple. It's called a banana drama, and apparently it is the libation equivalent of stepping on a banana skin.
Oh.
So
oh, does that mean I have to help you walk out? Like,
who can say? I might just have to have a whole week here.
You may have to park here.
I have to park myself and not leave in case of danger to myself and others.
Aha. Interesting. Well, I see my tipple before me now, and I have no idea what it is. It's a beautiful lavender color. However, there's little burrs floating in it, and it looks like rocks at the bottom.
How lovely.
I don't know what it is. I hope it tastes better than it looks, but it's sticky. It's also sticky. Oh my goodness.
That'll be nice going down.
and all she said, if you noticed when she came by, she said, this will help you connect with what you need to know. Maybe that's what the burrs are for. I don't know. They look pretty prickly.
I'm not sure whether the burrs are better than the birds that you got in that tipple a few weeks ago. Because you were spitting feathers after. It was a real mess.
Oh, no. I hope it's nothing that I spew.
It might be rocketing burrs across the tavern, hitting people left, right, and centre.
Oh, that's nasty.
Linda's burping at everybody. I'm sure there's something in these tipples that brings out the child in us.
Well, it doesn't need much help, I don't think.
No, I don't think so.
Which is just fine with me.
Yes, I think being awake is pretty much that's even optional.
I was just going to say, really? I can't agree with that.
When you think about a foundational Usui Reiki treatment, a series of hand positions, do this, do this, do this, and even 3 minutes where there's music with a little bell that goes off every 3 minutes so you can time. It's very, very systemic, regimented. this is what you do. A realm, in terms of Celtic Reiki, for example, is a treatment, but it's a treatment that lasts
A lifetime.
a lifetime, and it's designed to the same degree of definition as that foundational treatment, but it's designed as an environment. So there are so many moving parts and factors and elements in the design of that treatment to literally wrap around a person's life experience and
Right.
to treat them on this ongoing navigational journey style treatment. So the moment they step into that realm, they are navigating the treatment that has been designed for them in the realm.
And it comes with also you having the awareness of what is going on. This makes me think of the facets of ki, which represent arrangements of elements in creating everything we are. And that's what the realms are. The realms are utilizing all aspects of the various facets of ki. This force is not a magic wand or hand position activated phenomena, but a unique perspective and experience. It's interactive and not separate.
Absolutely, yeah.
Previously in the tavern, we've talked about synesthesia and how we experience, as I understand it, the facets of ki through synesthesia. It's a body, mind, spirit interaction.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which to me makes self-treatments or treatments to clients or even working with students much more effective because you're connecting at that level.
Yes, definitely. And the different forms of ki that create the overall experience of ki each have their own dynamic, their own perspective, and they interrelate with all of the others in specific ways, which is incredibly powerful because it creates this cycle of creation. And in terms of the ki philosophy, in the very Eastern terms, it is a cycle of creation of all things. This is how the universe came into being in terms of that philosophy. But you can apply that to so many other acts of creation.
Absolutely.
And it could be you're creating an essay and you use the philosophy of each facet of ki to develop that essay into something that's rich and woven like a tapestry. Or it could be that you design a treatment through the philosophy and ensuring that everything is interrelating within that treatment environment in such a way as to be perfectly balanced. And that's what the realms are doing. Each realm and each area of each realm pays significance to the different facets of ki, ensuring that they're all working in balance. And when you step into that environment, the particular thing that that environment works on, all of those facets of ki come into play to ensure that there is this balancing effect within you,
right,
as you wander around that particular area.
Yeah, absolutely. And it made me think when you were saying that about how important it is for us to understand Reiki as a force. Reiki's not a modality. And, in today's ever-changing world, we need 21st century skills that enable us to thrive with our ever-changing world. And so when we limit the power of the facets of ki, we're actually limiting everything in our perspective. And it's a matter of taking what we know that may be very ancient and bringing it forward to now and incorporating the two, evolving it to bring it to a much more fluid potential for now.
It's fascinating to me how the term Reiki is so often used interchangeably between the force and the treatment methodology. which is the equivalent, and you've heard this before, Linda, of taking electricity as a means of powering things and just using the term electricity for all of the things that it powers. So the electricity from the sky hit a tree last night. I sat and watched the electricity for 3 hours. My arm electricity picked up that glass. The moment we limit our terminology and our language around the experience of Reiki, we are stopping ourselves from experiencing the plethora of applications that come with the modalities of Reiki. So, as Reiki modality practitioners, as professionals, we need a sophisticated language to be able to express and communicate what we're talking about. When we interchange Reiki the modality with Reiki the force, it creates a rigidity within our practice. So I am fully aware that very often when I speak about Reiki, meaning the force, a lot of Usui Reiki practitioners will understand that as a series of hand positions and anything else that comes with the Usui Reiki modality. In their headspace, there is no difference between hand positions and the force. And this is like using the term electricity as a generic word for everything that electricity does. The moment, in terms of electricity, you say lightning, a television set, muscular impulse, you suddenly create 3 things that are different from electricity but powered by it. And it's the same with Reiki. The moment you say Usui Reiki, Celtic Reiki, Karmic Reiki, you are creating 3 modalities, each with their own myriad experiences that are different from Reiki, the thing that powers all 3 of those modalities. And you create a sophistication in the way you communicate and express what you are doing that is beyond anything that is commonly available or accessible in the Reiki community at the moment.
No. It's so limiting.
Absolutely, yeah. It's an aspect of Western culture to try and make things actual. So taking intangible concepts or free flow philosophies, the vagaries of a relationship, and seeing these as definitive, solid, immovable things.
Yeah.
And when we do that, we run them through our acceptance filters, our internal acceptance filters, to see if they fit. And if they do, we take them on board. And if they don't, we completely dismiss them.
Right.
So in terms of a Reiki modality, such as Usui Reiki being a tangible thing, a practice method, if you are using that or confusing that with Reiki the force, which is an intangible philosophy, you're trying to shoehorn in Usui Reiki,
Right.
where actually there needs to be something that is more philosophical as opposed to a tangible thing.
Right.
It's really interesting as well, because what we mean by acceptance is also very fixed in the Western ethos, in as much as in Eastern stories, if the narrator says something is true, that becomes the foundation of the story, and it's without question. So in the West, we need justification. We need irrevocable proof. We need testimonies signed in triplicate, to believe what we're told. And trust is really crucial. In the East, when the narrator says something, the audience trusts that the narrator is taking us into a rich story and atmosphere. a place where we will be navigating and having an adventure. Whereas in the West, that trust isn't necessarily there. People are constantly questioning, constantly trying to appease their skepticism until they're not. And then when they're not, anything goes,
Right.
But trust is crucial when it comes to Reiki and the other facets of Ki. Just trusting that there is a philosophy here that makes logical sense within its own environment. And when you enter into that environment and you understand how those relationships work, it can be of real value to you. And that's the key. It's a value, but you have to have trust in it first before you can accept it and accept each piece, each moving part, if you like.
Right. And that's a daily walk. That's not an overnight occurrence. That's not something where you read a book and you've got it. It's experiencing it day to day, moment by moment, experience by experience, and applying the facets in their role, because each have their own specific role. And to single out only one, you're discounting the whole.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because they represent the whole.
Yeah, definitely. And if you think about something like calculus.
Oh, don't make my head explode.
I'll try not to. I'll go easy. But I mean, calculus can help us to understand how the planets move around the stars. It can also help us to understand a tiny ripple in a pond. So if we want to understand things through the language of mathematics, calculus is a phenomenal way of doing that. The challenge is, if you are learning calculus and you start to question why the numbers are from 1 to 10, you're not going to learn calculus. If you're questioning those numbers and how they work and how they add up, subtract, divide and multiply, if that becomes problematic at a foundational level, you're not going to understand calculus.
Right.
You have to trust the numbers and that the numbers make sense before you can explore further. And that comes into play in terms of Reiki and the other facets of Ki. If you start to question it before you've even put a foot through the door, at no point will you be able to work with beyond the complexities of it.
Exactly. You won't get beyond.
Yeah.
That is so true. So true.
interesting when we actually come to understanding what the facets of ki are and how Reiki, as one of those facets, plays a part within this multifaceted experience of ki.
Mm-hmm.
And it all begins with a particular facet of ki known as Shinki, the divine ki. Shinki is absolutely non-physical. It does not exist in the physical world.
Right.
We could maybe call it potential, the potential to exist, but at no point does it actually exist in the physical world. So it's not real, which is quite an interesting way of looking at it. But also it underpins everything. Everything that exists in the world exists within the non-physical in terms of Shinki. And Shinki is like a precursor to the physical world. So it exists in Shinki before it exists in the physical world, even though Shinki does not exist in the physical world. So it's a bit like a mirror in many ways. The mirror image informs the reality, but it doesn't exist within the reality.
Right. Good analogy.
I made that one up on the spot. Just plucked it out of Shinki. There you go.
And there you have a live example.
Shinki says, I know you're talking about me. Be civil.
Oh, how well we are known.
The wonderful thing with Shinki is it knows everything. So it is utterly knowing of anything that can exist. Probably a few things that can't exist as well. Mm-hmm. But it is the divine plan, if you like. It is the all-knowing. There is only one thing that Shinki does not know, and that is what it is not to be Shinki. So it cannot experience anything that isn't Shinki.
Right.
In its own perspective. So, for example, it can understand everything about love, but it would never have gone on a first date and know the nerves and the trepidation of that. It would never have experienced a first kiss, or the joy of being bought roses, or the experience of falling in love with another person. So it would know all about those things, but it would never have experienced those at an individual, let's say human level.
Right.
Define it as human, but it could mean any experience where there is a loving relationship.
Yeah.
And so what Shinki does to solve this particular issue is it transforms itself into something that is not Shinki, so that it can experience the physical world and, in a way, forget that it is Shinki. It can be in an environment where it doesn't exist, so it can experience everything as a non-Shinki experience. Mm-hmm. And for us, in our terms, in our human terms, we see this as our reality. So Shinki is not here because it's forgotten that all things are Shinki. And so by that forgetting process and that disconnect between what is Shinki and what is not Shinki, we exist in this world not remembering that we are Shinki, which is sort of the point, really.
Yeah. In order to experience, we can't be.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's kind of mind-blowing, but the plot thickens.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. I'm sure you're dying to know, Linda. How does it do this?
I have a bit of an idea, but
I was going to say, you know the ending before we've actually started the story.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that read the last page.
Basically, what Shinki does is it divides itself into the various facets of ki. And we could understand these if we understand Shinki as a non-physical form of ki. All of the other facets of ki that mirror Shinki all have different degrees of physicality or tangibility to them. So what we could do is jump to the other end, jump to the end of the book, so to speak, and think about the first facet of ki, which is keki, the ki of blood. And keki is pure physicality. It has no knowledge or wisdom or any awareness at all. It is literally clay, just solid physical matter. But it doesn't have form. It's the most tangible experience of ki that we have in terms of physicality, yet without form, it cannot exist. So if we think about it, we identify the world around us through the forms that things take.
Right.
So we know a table from a chair, from a banana sundae, based upon the form of that thing, and we can identify it through its form. But keki does not have form, so we can't identify it, and because of that, it doesn't exist. Again, there's this mirroring between Shinki that doesn't exist and keki that doesn't exist in its purest non-form. So that's how Shinki can create a physical world, by transforming itself into something that is pure physical matter, but without form, it is still non-physical. Right. And it's a wonderful little juxtaposition. You can really see that Eastern philosophy coming in there, where it's like, okay, this doesn't really make sense, but I can see a logic in it, but it's still not.
There's more. That's why there's more. There's an interconnectedness. There's a fluidity to the process.
Yes.
Which is, I think, so important to understand if you are going to work with the force of Reiki.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it's here that we really begin to see how the foundation of what we are as physical substance, as beings in this physical world, relate to the divine, in as much as it's not this sophisticated, multifaceted relationship going on at this point. It is literally something non-physical remaining non-physical, but just creating an internal shift that makes it all physical.
Right.
But not. Until we meet the key of salt, or the salt force, Shioke. And Shioke creates the form, but also the purpose. It's the reason for that thing being there.
Yep.
And because substance cannot exist without shape or purpose, shape and purpose cannot exist without substance. They're intrinsically linked. So when Keki combines with Shioke, the building blocks of everything in solid form comes into being. It's at that moment there that suddenly the physical world is there.
Yeah.
Because substance is not enough. We need purpose and we need form. And at its most basic purpose and form, it is a Shinki's need to know what it is not to be Shinki. That provides the substance with a particular shape, purpose, form with which to start building the physical world.
Right.
The common analogy that is often used is that of clay and a brick. So clay is clay. It's just an amorphous lump that's shaped into a brick, and then you can start to build with it. For me, that concept is a little bit, because clay exists, it has shape and form. So we have to think of something that is pure physicality, but without purpose, without shape, without form, it cannot exist. When we match substance with form, shape and purpose, suddenly they come into being and the physical world is there.
Right. There's so much underlining principles of purpose here. Everything has a purpose.
Yes.
Everything has a role.
Yeah.
And we can't discard anything.
What I love is how this philosophy is thousands of years old. However, when we look at physics, and particularly quantum physics, there are parallels between this very ancient philosophy and the physics of light, for example, in terms of photons and how photons are packets of energy. There is energy, there is something in the photon, and there is a packet, which is the form of that particular subatomic particle. And there is a parallel. They're not connected. They're completely different philosophies, but there are parallels within this ancient philosophy and a modern philosophy and a modern science.
Absolutely. When we talk about the facets of Ki, we know they offer ancient cornerstones of the past. And when we recognize it, it is through the adaptation to this century that we can have depth of understanding and see the connections. Not everything that is old should be tossed out. Likewise, not everything that is old should be what we cling to and become limited in our understanding. We have to incorporate all that is present.
Here's another interesting little differentiation between the East and the West. In the West, we have gone through many times in history where history has been rewritten. And so a modern context or experience will rewrite an historical one. And we see it happening all the time. A big example of this were the Victorians, who rewrote history based on what they wanted history to be.
Right.
And that was through everything, whether it be in terms of books or whether it be in terms of putting crenellations on to a building to make it look more castle-like.
Yeah.
And they moved standing stones because they wanted them to be more aesthetically pleasing. So very often, here in the UK, if you go visit standing stones, they're not in the original place. They're sort of somewhere else where the Victorians decided they should be. So the Victorians did a lot of rewriting, and so much of modern spiritual philosophy, particularly in terms of New Age spirituality, was actually created by the Victorians.
Yes.
Much of the Celtic mythos was created by the Victorians.
Yes.
And it is extraordinary how our worldview is so entrenched within the Victorian viewpoint, a 19th and 20th century viewpoint,
Exactly.
even in the 21st century.
Right.
But that's been happening throughout Western history, to the point where Eastern philosophy that hasn't gone through that same process in many ways, as soon as that Eastern philosophy comes into the West does its thing and starts to rewrite things and starts to rework things. And we see that with Usui Reiki.
Yes,
How
most
something
definitely.
that was based on thousands of years worth of culture, history, philosophy, spiritual experience, the observations of hundreds of thousands of people, how that was all taken and distilled into a very Western 20th century ethos, and that's got stuck.
Yes.
And so many millions of people around the world who are practitioners of Usui Reiki in whatever level or form that may be are stuck in that box, which is a very, very small Western perspective of something that is so huge.
Massive. Absolutely. Absolutely. When we connect with the divine that is Shinki, we can embrace all facets. Working with every encounter in a way we can find and nurture our own personal truth within. As our world and universe changes and evolves, we need to adapt and sculpt our lives in ways that provides opportunities for growth and expansion. Makes me think about, we recognize Ki as containing facets. We don't say keys. We don't chunk it down. Just as we know energy is energy. and not energies.
I knew there was a
I
cringe
knew
coming there.
yeah,
I was
coming.
bracing myself for it. I like, oh no.
But I think it's important. We need to be able to speak our truths. You know, everyone's perspective is going to be their own unique truth. But the underlying, and the reason why I said this is the underlying drive for me is separation is an illusion. If we chunk things down, we're creating separateness. And this is about oneness. This isn't about us and them, you or me. This is about working as a whole. And that is what we've come away from. When we lose the original cornerstones of what Mikao Usui, his intention was, when we come away from that, we're limiting again. You know, we're chunking it down to more easier chunkable, digestible pieces when we're taking away from the whole.
And it is remarkable how a very simple change in perspective and the way that we view things in the world can have such a massive impact
Absolutely.
on how we approach aspects of experience, such as the experience of Reiki and the other facets of Ki. When we think about water, we understand that water is water. There is water in the ocean, there is water in a glass, there is water in our bodies, there is water in the sky, but it's all water. And we understand that the water in the sky can rain down and become water in the ocean. And that water in the ocean can be in a river, or it can be traveling through a mountain being filtered out so that there's a spring we can drink water from. And the water in our body will eventually at some point be in the clouds, in the ocean. That same water went through the veins of prehistoric creatures.
Yes.
And it arrived here on ancient comets, in the ice of ancient comets. So the water has this continual interrelated journey. We can separate it through context, talk about water as ice in a comet, or water in a glass of water that we're drinking, but we understand it all as water. And this is where my absolute aversion to the term energies comes into being, because it separates.
Absolutely.
It's saying the water in the glass is different to the water in the ocean and different to the water in the comets billions of years ago. And I think that when we stop differentiating between an energy and another energy, and when we just think in terms of energy or ki,
yes,
it integrates everything into a sense of contextuality, where it is one thing that is just contextually defined,
right,
as opposed to being separate from. It's
right.
So important.
It's a flip of the switch with regard to perspective. You know, when you look at it from that light, you're able to be in awe, number one, but also it kind of brings on a certain amount of accountability and responsibility on what you do in your day-to-day. When you see the value that it is, it just makes me take a step back and say to myself, what's my legacy in all of this? What am I actually doing in my day-to-day, working with the facets of Ki in order to share that? You know, again, it's not a matter of us and them, it's a matter of bringing back to a whole.
Exactly, yes. I mean, another analogy that we could have in terms of energy and force is one of air, and the idea of the air as being this one thing that we all experience and partake in. And we can't differentiate one bit of air from another because it's all intermingled and interrelated. So we could talk about the air in my lungs right now that then becomes absolutely foundational to the voice and the words that I'm speaking. So we could talk about air enabling me to talk and to speak and to share my truth with the world. But that's no different to the air that you breathe.
Right.
Even though we are separated by thousands of miles in our home environment, not here, of course, because here we're sitting next to each other, but in the sense of you can be the other side of the world and still breathe the same air.
Right.
Because there is no disconnect. But what is really interesting is that if there is a sealed room and that room is shut and sealed up, the air in that room becomes stale. We talk about stale air. So that when that room is unsealed and that air comes out, you can smell the stale air. But as soon as it mixes with the air outside of that room, it is just air again. You can't differentiate it.
Right.
And the same thing happens when we divide up energy, Ki, or so many other things.
Separate it. When we separate it, it's
separate it.
I think definition is important for our own human comprehension.
Yeah.
We in order for us to experience anything, we have to understand, even if it's not full understanding, we need some sort of definition to identify what it is.
Absolutely, yes.
Without taking away from what it is.
Yeah, for sure. And the idea of Ki stagnating in terms of traditional Eastern medicine is very prevalent, and it's one of the things that is treated through one of the various modalities of ancient medicine. Because there is this idea of when Ki is moving through the meridian system, that it can stagnate. I know where you're going
with this. Yeah, it gets blocked. Yeah.
And it is the same as air, you know, in that respect, as we can define it into a box.
Yep.
And the nature of Ki is such that when you define it into a box, it stagnates.
Right.
And can become like stale air.
Yes.
The moment you take that definition away, it becomes one again. And there is no longer a psychological barrier between this box and the world. So one of the things that I've often found in terms of conversation around energy is when people say my energy and your energy. Because it's creating stale energy.
Yes.
The very definition of mine and yours, it creates this stagnancy within what we're actually talking about, which is oneness.
Right.
The moment we take that definition away and we remove it, we take the box away, suddenly we go back to oneness. And we realize that there is no my energy, your energy. There is just energy.
Right.
And we can contextualize it, we can partake in it, we can experience it, but it is always one. And there is no difference between the energy I experience and the energy you experience. It is just energy.
Right. which is wonderful.
Oh.
We all always need to be reminded of what it is.
Mm.
You know, we do things out of habit, out of conditioning, out of, upbringing, historical information passed down, however you want to look at it. We set up boundaries, we set up walls, we set up boxes, and they serve their purpose up to a certain point, but they are limiting. And sometimes we get stuck on a path that keeps us in a loop, and we keep trying to understand, why do we keep encountering this? Blow out the boundaries, blow out the limited beliefs, expand your understanding, embrace something different.
Absolutely.
I think I may have read this, I'm not sure. Or maybe you just told me this, I don't know.
It's all oneness.
Yes. But, I've mentioned this before, prior to my studying Celtic Reiki, I really didn't have a really good foundation about what was out there. And I was always very confused with the term Reiki. In my mind, at least, I had half a brain to recognize that, Mikao Usui was the originator, and why people were calling it Reiki and not Usui Reiki. And that was the saturated environment that I was in, because that's the only people I knew were Usui Reiki practitioners who were calling themselves Reiki practitioners. Now, hindsight is 2020. Now I recognize that not only was that a limited perspective of working with a facet of Ki. Fast forward to one therapy, I believe, and I could be wrong, so I'm open to correction, I'm pretty sure one therapy is the only current practice that works with all facets of Ki. That's a big contrast to me. It's kind of like, do you want this big basket of fruit, or do you want this one piece? I'm going to take the big basket.
Yeah. And I know that there are Usui Reiki masters who work with the facets of Ki, but in terms of formal experience and formal training, the practitioners of V Reiki, Celtic Reiki, One Therapy are the only professionals who are trained, certainly to this level of depth in terms of the facets. And when we get to some of the nuances at the Reiki degree of Ki, we begin to see how modern influences come into play as well with the facets of Ki.
Yeah, it is, and again, it's my perspective, it's what I live. And so I see the facets of Ki interlaced in all of one therapy. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's, Psy-Q or V Reiki, it's in all of them.
Absolutely, yeah. And the foundational philosophy that we work with is one that is continually growing and continually offering new avenues of exploration. It's not, this is a box that you put things into. Keki is not a box. And once you understand that this is how it is, this is exactly what it is, we shut down that box and create stagnancy. It is a free form, flowing, evolving, perspective-based experience. Talking of fluidity and fluid motion, the next facet of Ki is Mitsuki, the Ki of water. And the way that this facet of Ki acts within our narrative, it's the force that binds things together. So you have these bricks that are formed of Keki and Shioke, and Mitsuki is the cement that binds them together. So we start to build from this process. So if you think about all of the building blocks that make the human body, the force that brings those building blocks together is Mitsuki.
Right.
quite like to look at these facets of ki in pairs, because they do have these relationships, these sort of coupled relationships internally. So kuki is the next facet of ki, which is the ki of air. And kuki creates space between the physical experience of these growing, evolving building blocks that are all bound together. And by creating space, it creates definition. So kuki, the key of air, is what we use to define you, Linda, me, Martin, and the separation between us. So it's really here that there is this illusion of not being one,
Right.
being oneself. And where we see the separateness in the world and the disconnect in the world, it's because of the experience of kuki.
Right.
But it's necessary, because if we didn't have that in terms of the physical world, if kuki didn't exist, Midzuki would just keep growing. Midzuki is an expansive force. It expands outwards all the time. Kuki is a limiting force. It limits that expansion. And by doing so, it enables us to define one thing from another thing.
Right.
And I love the relationship between these two, because they are expansion and contraction. And so whenever we are expanding into the world, whenever we are joyous and want to share and communicate and be and love and show compassion, we are expanding into the world.
We're the key of water.
Yeah, exactly. And when we are in ourselves and we contract into ourselves, we are creating definition, creating individuality, creating a sense of oneselfness. And it is interesting how we need oneself in oneness, because otherwise it would all be an amorphous blob.
Sometimes I do feel like, but but it's interesting that you mentioned polarity, because all the facets of ki have a partner in crime, so to speak, and they work together with polarity to create whatever that role is that they possess. And again, it's a very simple concept when you break it down for human definition and understanding, to be able to implement the power of that facet in understanding that polarity is at work. It's like a wonderful tool bag of being able to say, okay, I can't stay stuck in this little pocket. I need to move on, and working with the facets allows us to expand further.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I find it utterly amazing how there is this innate logic or theme that runs through the philosophy of the facets of ki that just connects so deeply to so many different aspects of life. So if we think about this idea of growth and limitation, of expansion and contraction, and the polarity between these two forces, the tension that is created within that conflict between these two, it creates the dynamics of life.
Mm-hmm.
And there is so much in life that comes from the need to acquire, the need to expand, the need to get bigger, more of, faster, richer. And the idea of limitation. We don't like limitation.
No.
We don't. We see limitation as a bad thing, but every time we limit something, we define it in a clearer, more tangible way.
Absolutely.
And that tangibility is vital to exist in the physical world and to have one's own presence in the physical world. But also, it really does come down to how we limit. There are different ways of limiting things, and you can limit things in a way that creates conflict and that works against the experience of Midzuki, or you can limit in a way where the two complement each other,
right,
and actually create something wonderful together.
Create the space you need. literally and figuratively, the space you need to be able to adapt to this new aspect of who you are, or situation, or this is so vast. This is in problem resolution, this is in life planning, this is in every aspect of our life.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's Reiki, but not as you know it, is getting you thinking, trying things out, noticing stuff, or simply making you chuckle wryly at the nonsensical goings-on in the tavern, then do exactly what you know every good podcast needs. Subscribe on your favourite podcast platform and leave a review. This helps others discover it's Reiki, but not as you know it, and will give you a warm glow inside, just like one of Linda's herbal tipples.
And if we think about in terms of Shinki, the divine key, there is oneness within Shinki. All that is Shinki. And that oneness, if we just work with the three facets of ki, Keki, Shioke, Mizuki, we would just replicate that same oneness.
Mm-hmm.
It is the experience of the Kuki experience that comes in and actually enables us to create definition and nuance and a finite experience of the world that eventuates in this learning of Shinki. Shinki learns what it is not to be Shinki because of the effect of Kuki and the limiting, defining effect of Kuki.
It's that stop moment, it's the moment of, oh, look around, what's this?
Exactly. And if we were all just an amorphous lump, we wouldn't achieve very much. What we achieve in life comes down to the sense of self that we experience, which is instilled within us through Kuki. So what amazes me, and you mentioned this earlier, Linda, legacy. We were born for purpose. Every single one of us was born for purpose. Not just a single purpose, I don't think, but many purposes. We are here to fulfill purpose. And when we fulfill purpose, we create legacy. And legacy extends beyond our own lifetime.
Right.
It exists in a time experience that is bigger than the minutes and hours that we get in life.
Right.
But that could not come if we were undefined,
Right.
if we were not limited in some way. And it's through our limitations and the way in which they sculpt us that a sculpted legacy can be created in one's own lifetime.
Right. That's profound. That's huge.
Yeah.
And it's huge, but it's a joy.
Yeah.
When you shift your perspective of awareness of what it's really all about, you really embrace everything.
Yeah.
Regardless of what form it takes, what challenge it may present. If you are constantly looking at things from a whole perspective rather than separate, I don't know, it just makes it a little more manageable on your day to day.
Yeah. In many ways, these two siblings, the first is the only child who just wants
Yes.
everything, wants all the toys, wants all the attention, wants to be the center of attention. And then the second sibling comes along and suddenly there has to be a sharing happening.
And there's disruption.
And the disruption, because one wants it all, the other knows about sharing, and that's all they've known is to share.
Yeah.
So they will portion themselves and then give a portion to the other, because that's what they have grown up doing. And that's very much Kuki. Kuki defines oneself and the other. And so these two separate entities can create a relationship outside of themselves because of that separation. Whereas if Mizuki was just allowed to be the only child, it would just engulf everything.
Right.
And we see this in life, in the behaviors of people, the people around us, in as much as we are indoctrinated into more.
Yeah.
We always want more. We desire more. And when we get more, the more transforms into other forms of more.
Yeah.
Such as a faster car, for example. It's not enough that I've got this vehicle that takes me from A to B. It's got to be faster. It's got to be more expensive. It's got to have more status attached to it. And this is what we are told in many societies, particularly Western society, of the value of a person. Their value is measured by how much more they've got, how much more they are. The Kuki philosophy, which is often seen in a lot of Eastern culture, is the one of coming back into oneself and focusing in on knowing rather than more.
Right.
So it's about that internal experience and who we are as individuals and how we define ourselves as individuals, how we live our lives. And that's so important, because that conflict is constantly there just by default. And it's not until we start to actually consciously pay it attention and start to say, right, there's conflict here. Let me work with this. Let me resculpt, redefine, change, transform, so that the conflict is lessened, it's softened in some way, or even negated, because it doesn't need to be there.
Right.
It's an internal polarity that is created rather than an external polarity. So we use Kuki to build an internal polarity, and an internal structure. And that's really known as knowing ourselves.
Right, right. And it's transformative, obviously.
Absolutely, yes.
Fascinating stuff, as usual.
The facets of Ki for me was such a revolutionary ethos in terms of understanding the nature of Ki and the nature of Reiki and
But it
where
helps
Reiki
you
is.
understand how the pieces fit.
Yeah.
It's seeing the big picture,
Yes.
instead of focusing in on something that when you focus so intently on one particular thing, you get closer and closer, it loses its substance almost.
Yes. Yeah. It's so relationship based, and this mirrors life in as much as we can be in our own heads, in our own stuff, or we can be out in the world meddling in other people's business. But all the time, relationships are key to how we interact with ourselves and with others. So the relationship we have with ourselves and the relationship we have with others are so important. And this is reflected in the nature of Ki.
Absolutely. Somewhere I had read, and I think it was in my journal, that the facets of Ki represent keys, KEYS's, to the locks of our perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And when we utilize the facet of keys, we actually utilize the keys to unlock and shift.
Yes. Yeah. It's an interesting tangent.
Uh-oh.
I know. It's like, oh, stop. A number of years ago, more than I care to remember now, I wrote a book called The Key to Business and Personal Success, which in its pinnacle moment uses the facets of Ki as keys. And there is this process within the book where it's unlocking this idea of using these different relationships and different dynamics to work with social locks. And the locks that we talk about in the Ki are actually social evolution and how we evolve socially, going from a purely instinctual, survival-based organism all the way through to vastly sophisticated aspects of social structure and social perspective. And each layer in this social evolution creates safety and creates a prison. And we lock ourselves in, but we're also imprisoned by that lock. And how we can use Ki or the keys to unlock those social prisons to evolve into the next layer of experience in terms of our social sophistication.
Right. It's a social sophistication and evolution.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And it just amazes me how not only in terms of society is this evolution seen, everything from the community of tribalism and how tribes formed through to how we have a sense of leaders in the world and how leadership has become an aspect of social evolution. People go from being part of the community to leaders of the community, through to the formation of government and religion, through to the formation of business and corporation, social conscience in terms of the environment. These are all aspects of social evolution and where our desires and our compassion is focused. And without it, we would not have a way of navigating societies that encompass billions of people.
Right.
It's what gives us framework at a societal level, but also at a community level and at an individual level. And so being able to unlock those prisons that we trap ourselves in terms of our community and how they can create a very safe environment for us, but they can also trap us, through to the idea of government and country and patriotism. These things can be very comforting for people, but they can also shut us down from a broader perspective, a deeper
very,
perspective.
very limiting.
Yeah. And we can use the facets of ki in terms of the keys, or in terms of facets of ki, force, and the interplay between that force. We can use these to evolve as people and work towards legacy, as opposed to just consumption.
Right.
We're not just consuming from life, hoovering up the air and using it to no purpose. We are literally investing breath all the time to legacy and towards legacy.
Right.
I finished my banana drama, and yes, it is the equivalent of standing on a banana skin. And as much as the room is turning upside down. So I think I need a balancing or polarity tipple to balance this out.
Oh, good.
So
not a bucket. Not a bucket. Okay. Okay.
There were no buckets here. We'll be bucket-less. Particularly as some of the tipples here come in buckets, so we wouldn't want to get confused. So
no. And I have finished mine, and interesting enough, the rocks dissolved.
Oh.
And so there was no, I didn't have to worry about choking or blocking or any of that nasty. And the burrs went down a lot easier than I thought.
Let's hope they come out the other end as easy.
But I would actually like to have another.
Oh, another one. Another burr rock concoction.
Yes.
I'm sure Cornelia will know what I'm talking about.
Yes, she will.
And I shall ask her to surprise me.
Oh, dear.
I'll head off and get those for us. And I will be as quick as I can, but just in case I get delayed by any reason, now and always.
Oh.
Being enchanted.
Being enchanted, for sure.
This podcast is freely available, and we are delighted that you find it intriguing and valuable enough to journey with us to this point. When you are ready to experience the power of One Therapy, its tools, techniques and perspectives for yourself, visit the Realm of Romanos. Go to www.one-therapy.com and start your adventure today.